I did this for 7 years, George, as you know, as U.S. Attorney. I don't care what you were running for. We're not telling you. We're not a private investigation firm to help you with vetting your people who you employ in your campaign. The fact is that the reason we operate that way is because in the Justice Department, we're supposed to keep those things secret. We're legally bound to keep them secret unless and until we have some type of charges to announce.
That was a little bit of tough love from the president's friend, former U.S. Attorney, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie this morning, responding to these tweets from the president. He wrote, quote, "As only one of two people left who could become the president, why wouldn't the FBI or Department of Justice, in quotes for some reason, have told me they were secretly investigating Paul Manafort on charges that were 10 years old and had previously, I think he meant to write been, dropped during my campaign. Should have told me." He continued, "Paul Manafort came to the campaign very late and was with us very short." I'm not reading the rest of this. Anyway, he's tweeting about Manafort, Joyce Vance. Is he worried that maybe Manafort has taken a deal? Let's remind everyone who Paul Manafort is. He was the president's campaign chairman. He lied at the convention when he said no one's ever talked to any Russians. They were awash in Russians. There were Russians everywhere. They were bathing and showering with Russians. They changed the platform at the convention. There were Russians everywhere. He's been charged with gazillion counts of FARA violations and this and that, and his son-in-law former son-in-law just did a deal. What's the worry with Paul Manafort?
You know, Paul Manafort was also charged with a Klein conspiracy. That's a conspiracy to defraud the United States. And Mueller could, but not necessarily will, broaden that conspiracy, and that has to be at the core of the president's concern. Will that conspiracy reach into his inner circle? Could it, for instance, grab a family member or another close aide, or even lead to himself, if not for indictment purposes, but in the report that Mueller ultimately writes? So here's where... Go ahead.
No, I'll keep going, but I want to add another question. So answer this and then address this. Steve Bannon said in the book Fire and Fury that the money laundering investigators, folks like Andrew Weissman, would go straight through Paul Manafort to get to Jared to F Trump. I mean, that was a theory posited by the president's most senior political advisor.
Well, look, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to get there. That's how prosecutors work. They go up that chain. And if Paul Manafort, who had a lot of capacity and who had a lot of ability to be around these people during the campaign and be involved in conversations, we saw in his daughter's tweets that were unfortunately leaked that he was running up and down the back stairs at Trump Tower talking to the president. He would have a lot of information to share with Mueller. And it might be both historical information about Trump's business dealings in Russia, more modern information about what went on during the campaign, and even perhaps some insight into whether there was an expected payoff if there was collusion after the campaign. And the pressure on Manafort at this point will be tremendous. He is close to trial in at least one of his cases. He is no longer getting friendly readings from the judges. There was a little blip there where one of the judges in Alexandria wanted to explore Mueller's constitutional power. But I think Mueller is going to be close to the end of his rope, and the president either knows that something has happened or is very worried that Manafort, who he's increasingly trying to distance himself from and say he would have never hired if Mueller had told him that there were problems, trying to sort of rule Manafort out of the inner circle. And Manafort was one of the first people charged. I think it was Manafort and George Papadopoulos who pleaded guilty, or the guilty plea was unsealed that first day. But Manafort also may be the person about whom they know the most. There was the no-knock raid. They have dozens of zip files and computers and phones. I mean, Manafort could tell them a lot if he were to cooperate.
And if you're Paul Manafort and you're reading the president's tweet, that is now starting to shift tone about you, right? It's saying Manafort may have been a bad guy and the FBI should have told me that. It's no longer I'm holding out for a pardon, I'm the president's buddy. It's the president's wishing the FBI had told him how bad I am. So what does that do to Manafort? I think it makes him more inclined to cooperate.
And it's so different from the tweets he was sending out about Mike Flynn, which were stay strong, Mike.
Indeed. So he's up to something. The president knows something, senses something. Manafort's close to cooperating, or it's getting worse. Manafort's former son-in-law has now flipped on him. Things are bad. President changing his tone. Manafort's a bad guy. I wish I had known.
And we've heard this about George the Coffee Boy. We've heard this. I mean, this is a pattern for sure.
Look, Manafort is a bad guy. He knew better. He broke the law. It's clear he did that. And Donald Trump danced with the devil. But Donald Trump is a guy who takes a lot of devils to the dances. And that's exactly what he's caught up in. and you heard it from Manafort's own family, we know that that's the direction that Mueller is looking at. Mueller is saying, Donald Trump, you sought counsel from all of these people who likely violated the law, and in some we've indicted or gotten plea deals from. Donald Trump, what did you know and when did you know it? And it is the reason that his attorneys will not let him sit with Bob Mueller.
All right, Joyce Vance, thank you for spending so much time with us. When we come back, the one portion of that